Good evening and welcome to Gravitas. I'm Palki Sharma Upadhyay. Let's get started. The war in Europe has completed 30 days today. Multiple cities in Ukraine lie in ruins. 10 million people have been displaced. Supply chains have been disrupted. Nuclear power plants have come this close to mishaps. In all of these days and weeks, what has Europe done to defend one of its own? What has NATO done after dangling the carrot of membership before Kiev? They watched from the sidelines and made a lot of noise. Countless meetings, endless threats, sanctions, and lots of applause for the Ukrainian president. If only moral support could win wars or save people when bombs are raining on them. Europe continues to buy Russian oil and gas. As we speak, NATO leaders are meeting. They invited Zelensky to talk. They heard his demands and then rejected them. On Gravitas tonight, as we bring you updates from the mega meetings in Europe, we also look at why this has become a frozen conflict.
Mr. President,
Lieber Volodymyr Zelensky,
you now have the floor. President,
are lucky to have you as our champion.
והנפגעים האוקראינים במלחמה.
В Україні, в Європі у 2020 сотні мільйонів людей навіть.
І люди продовжують.
Your Excellencies, if I can ask you to look into the camera for 5 seconds.
It has been 1 month. Russian forces marched into Ukraine exactly 30 days ago. And since then, they have launched airstrikes, laid siege to cities and driven 10 million people out of their homes. Europe has seen its worst violence in decades, but Europe's response still remains half-hearted. Here's a quick recap of how the last 1 month has looked like. Bombs and missiles raining on Ukraine, Russian forces targeting civilians, the West imposing sanctions left, right and center, but still buying Russian oil. Since the invasion began, Europe has paid more than $19 billion to Russia for oil and gas. So much for punishing it, $19 billion. What about helping Ukraine? The West has sent arms, 17,000 weapons and counting, but they're not giving Ukraine what it really wants. An embargo on trade with Russia, a no-fly zone, a membership of the European Union, a membership of NATO. The result is this. Ukraine has become a frozen conflict. The Russian offensive is stalled. Ukraine lacks the firepower to overcome the Russians, but it seems to have enough to not let them win, hence a frozen conflict. In fact, US intelligence says Russia has retreated a bit, by 30 kilometers, they say. Russian forces, according to the US, is now stationed close to eastern Ukraine. Where were they earlier? 20 kilometers from the center of Kiev. Reports say Russia has moved from offensive to defensive positions, but they're making gains in eastern Ukraine. Today, Russia claimed control of a new city, the city of Izium in the Kharkiv region.
By the morning of March 24th, units of the Russian army took full control of the city of Izium in the Kharkiv region. On the evening of March 23rd and at night on March 24th, military facilities of the Ukrainian armed forces were hit with high-precision long-range sea and air-based weapons.
Kiev has contested Moscow's claims. It says Izium remains under its control. Why is Izium important? If it falls, that this is what will happen. It falls on a key route towards Donbass. If Russia controls Izium, Russian forces in the north and the south can potentially link up there. A bigger offensive is underway in Mariupol. 2,000 civilians have died. 80% of the homes there have been destroyed. Russia apparently wants to build a land bridge through the city, one that will connect Donbass and Crimea. Earlier today, we received a video. This is what Mariupol looks like now.
Тут сквозные дома. Нам приходится проезжать. Вот такие вот чудесный способ.
Meanwhile, Ukraine says it took down a large Russian landing ship today. It was 75 kilometers from Mariupol. Ukrainian forces shared videos and pictures from the scene. You can see a plume of thick smoke. How much longer can Ukraine put up a fight? Well, that's what Europe too discussed today. A mega summit has begun. Leaders from the European Union, the G7 and NATO states are meeting, starting with the NATO. Among the attendees are US President Joe Biden, French President Emmanuel Macron, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson, even Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Guess who else joined this NATO meet? A country that will not get NATO membership in the foreseeable future, Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky joined via video call. He repeated old demands: more military support, more weapons, and more aid without restrictions. That's what he asked for.
The Ukrainian army has been resisting for a month in unequal conditions, and I have been repeating the same thing for a month now. To save people and our cities, Ukraine needs military assistance without restrictions. As without restrictions, Russia is using its entire arsenal against us, destroys all living things, any objects from houses to churches, from food warehouses to universities, from bridges to hospitals. Ukraine turned to you for planes so that we do not lose so many people. And you have thousands of fighter jets, but we haven't been given one yet. You have at least 20,000 tanks. Ukraine asked for 1% of all your tanks. Give to us or sell to us. But we do not have a clear answer yet. The worst thing during the war is not having clear answers to requests for help.
India has been repeating the same thing for a month now. Zelensky has been on a virtual world tour, you could say, addressing parliaments from America to Japan, but getting little more than applause. The West won't send troops or impose a no-fly zone or give NATO membership or even EU membership. Ukraine is damaged goods now. All that the West is prepared to do is announce more sanctions, fortify its own defenses. The UK has announced 65 new sanctions. The US is mulling sanctions on members of Russia's State Duma. These threats come with concessions for Russia. Reports say Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, aka Putin's banker, will be spared. He is the man who owns the Chelsea football club, the one he's trying to sell. Why is he being spared? Apparently Zelensky asked for it. Personal request to Biden: don't sanction Abramovich. Why? Because he could potentially mediate a truce between Ukraine and Russia. Good luck with that. Meanwhile, Europe is talking about a new plan, diversifying their gas supply, shifting away from Russian imports. What are their options? The United States of America. This war, you have to say, is proving to be a money spinner for the US. Their weapons are selling, so is their gas now. What about their troops? Will they see some action? Only to be deployed in NATO's eastern flank, we are told. We're looking at 4 new posts. 4 NATO countries: Bulgaria, Hungary, Romania and Slovakia. Again, nothing for Ukraine there. This is despite the threat of chemical weapons. The NATO chief has said that Russia could create a pretext to use them next.
We are determined to do all we can to support Ukraine, and I welcome the concrete offers of assistance made by allies today. At the same time, we have a responsibility to ensure the conflict does not escalate further, because this would be even more dangerous and more devastating.
And that is the headline. 1 month into the war, we're seeing more of the same: bluster. The West securing its interests while also taking the moral high ground of helping a democracy and standing up to an aggressor. The only war they're fighting and winning is that of narratives. By the way, NATO is not the only sitting duck. The United Nations Security Council is equally ineffective. In fact, it's built that way. And Wednesday was another example. The Council convened to discuss another resolution. This time, Russia was pushing for it, not the United States. What did this resolution say? Well, broadly 2 things. A, parties must agree to a ceasefire. And B, aid access and protection for civilians. Sounds agreeable, doesn't it? Well, not really. Diplomacy is all about the finer details. This resolution does not say who started the war. It glosses over Russia's aggression, so naturally the West pushed back. Only 2 UNSC members voted for the resolution, China and Russia. The other 13 abstained from voting. So ultimately the resolution was defeated. But India was among the countries that abstained. And this was New Delhi's third abstention at the United Nations Security Council. The first two resolutions were pushed by the West, this one by Russia. In both cases, India refused to pick sides. How should we read this abstention? For starters, it clarifies India's position. There was a lot of debate around India's neutrality, around the two abstentions. Some called it tacit approval for Russia's invasion. Well, clearly that's not the case. This position was further clarified by India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar today. He was speaking in Parliament and he spelled out six principles that dictate India's position on Ukraine. Listen to this.
Where our own position on Ukraine is concerned, it is very clear, sir. It is based on six principles. One, that we call for immediate cessation of violence and end to all hostilities. We stand for peace. Two, we believe that there is no other way than a return to the path of dialogue and diplomacy. Three, we recognize that the global order is anchored on international law, UN Charter, and respect for territorial integrity and sovereignty of all states. Four, we call for humanitarian access to a conflict situation. Five, we ourselves give humanitarian assistance. We have given 90 tons of humanitarian assistance so far, and we are looking at providing more, especially medicines. And six, we are in touch with the leadership of both the Russian Federation and Ukraine on this matter. The Prime Minister himself has spoken to the presidents of both countries.
Let me repeat that for you. Immediate ceasefire, dialogue and diplomacy, rules-based global order, UN Charter, territorial integrity and humanitarian aid. These are the six principles of India's Ukraine policy. Are these principles pro-Russia? If so, why emphasize on territorial integrity or the UN Charter? That emphasis indirectly calls out Russia's actions. India's position is rooted in two things, realism and national interest. The West can keep talking about spirited resistance, they can keep shipping weapons to Ukraine, but it is only delaying the inevitable. The realistic solution is a political deal, a peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, and India is not the only one pushing for it. US allies like Turkey and Israel are doing the same. The second factor is national interest. India buys weapons and oil from Russia. There is good reason to keep this trade alive. Around 70% of India's military hardware is Russian. We are talking about jets, guns and missiles. Those weapons will need servicing, they will need spare parts, so India cannot abandon its military cooperation with Russia. What about oil? Well, here the dependence is much less. Less than 1% of India's oil comes from Russia. Having said that, India does not plan to stop those imports either. Listen to this.
Indian foreign policy decisions are made in Indian national interest. And we are guided by our thinking, our views, our interests. So there's no question of linking the Ukraine situation to issues of trade.
So India will keep trading with Russia. The question is how. Most Russian banks have been booted from the global banking network. So how will they make payments? One proposal is the rupee-ruble trade. How would that work? You see, normally international trade happens in dollars. You pay and receive in dollars. But this new proposal takes the dollar out of the equation. So India pays in rupees and Russia pays in rubles. Jaishankar says the finance ministry is discussing this proposal. Some reports say it could be activated next week. This will make trade easier, but will it complicate the politics? Earlier this week, Joe Biden called India's position shaky. Hours later, the State Department called India a partner of choice. So which is it? New Delhi must keep monitoring these signals from both Russia and the West. And this is the risk with neutrality, as we pointed out before. Both sides suspect you. Both sides think you're helping the other. The only solution is to send clear messages. Wednesday's abstention at the UNSC was a message to Russia. The decision to keep trading with Moscow is a message to America. Guess who else is sending messages to Russia? American lawmakers. They're talking about a coup. Members of America's Republican Party have publicly endorsed the idea. The likes of U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham. He said Russian people should stand up and take Putin out. And statements like these have led to a lot of speculation. Is Washington up to something? Is a coup against Vladimir Putin even possible? He's been in power for, 22 years now. How real is the threat? Will the invasion of Ukraine spell the end of Putin? Here's a report.
Vladimir Putin is the most hated man in the West right now. Joe Biden calls him a war criminal. Justin Trudeau says Putin is capable of terrible things. A former national security advisor of Donald Trump called Vladimir Putin a killer. Strong statements, but they pale in comparison to what U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham has said. He is publicly calling for a coup against the Russian president.
I want the Russian people to take this man out.
A coup against Vladimir Putin? Is that even possible? Lindsey Graham might find the idea appealing, but experts say it's difficult. They believe Vladimir Putin can thwart a coup. He is said to be preparing for one since 1999. Russia's intelligence service, the FSB, the successor of the KGB, is said to hold the key for Putin's grip on power. The FSB has a military counterintelligence unit. It has existed since the days of the KGB. When Vladimir Putin took power, he strengthened this unit. FSB officers are now embedded directly into the Russian military. They keep an eye on the generals. One of Putin's loyalists also keeps a check on dissent. In 2016, the Russian president created the National Guard, and he appointed this man to lead it. Viktor Zolotov. He was a bodyguard of Vladimir Putin. Zolotov has been given an important task. As head of the National Guard, he has two key responsibilities: crowd control during protests and quashing dissent. Protests and dissent set the stage for a coup. The National Guard must crush them. Beyond the FSB and the National Guard, Russian security services also protect the top leadership. Federal Protective Service, or the FSO, guards the Kremlin. Its infantry units are deployed to protect the Russian president. The FSO also works the Russian intelligence to monitor the military. Vladimir Putin has a system in place to protect his position. It is now being tested. The events of the last 1 month have raised the threat perception. A report says the risk of a coup against the Russian president is growing every week, and that the FSB could very well execute such a plan. Apparently, Russia's security services are unhappy with the invasion of Ukraine. Earlier this month, 2 senior FSB officers were put under house arrest. Reports say Putin himself gave the orders. There are also claims of a power struggle inside the Kremlin. Recently, a veteran Russian government official opposed the war. These statements are hardly a sign of widespread discontent, but they do prove that there is discontent, even if anyone is not being able to express it.
Now, do you have a favorite brand of chips? Well, all of us do, I think. I'm sure you recognize its color, the packet shape, the branding, but what about the content inside? Do you know how many pieces make one packet of chips? Chances are you don't. So imagine one day the company decides to change the quantity, the number of chips inside. They take one piece from the packet. The price doesn't change, only the quantity does. Would you notice this change? Again, chances are you wouldn't. And this strategy is called shrinkflation. Some of you may have heard about it, shrinkflation. The quantity falls, but the price does not fall. Why are we talking about this now? Because the pandemic has made shrinkflation common, and the war in Ukraine has made it worse. There are labor shortages, supply chain issues, rising costs, so every company wants to increase revenue, and they need more money to survive the pandemic. The question is, how do they do that? How can companies earn more money from the same product? Well, there are 3 main strategies. Number 1, you can try producing cheaply, except that we are living through a pandemic, so production costs are only rising, not falling. Number 2, you can charge more. Higher the price, higher the revenue. Again, just one problem. The moment you charge more, you lose customers. Which brings us to strategy number 3. Don't change the price, instead change the quantity. I'll give you a few examples. Sunmade is a leading American raisin company. Look at their old packet on the left. The net weight was 22 ounces. That's around 630 grams. Now look at their new packet. That's on the right. The net weight is 20 ounce, 570 grams. What about the price? No change there. Sunmaid started selling less for the same price, and chances are nobody noticed. Example number 2, Dove shampoos. Look at the old bottle on the left. It weighed around 24 ounces, 710 ml. Now look at the new bottle on the right. It weighs 22 ounces, 650 ml. Again, the price is unchanged. Example number 3, a pack of Doritos. The old pack weighed 9.75 ounces, that's 288 grams. The new one, 9.25 ounces, 273 grams, same price. And there is nothing new about shrinkflation, by the way. It's almost as old as trade itself. Then why do consumers fail to spot it? Because the changes are so small. Let me show you that raisin packet, or the 2 raisin packets again. Do you see the change in design? The old one had a wider top. The new one is a perfect rectangle. Normally we ignore such changes. We think of them as part of a marketing campaign. But in reality, it is shrinkflation. Here's another example, a bottle of Gatorade. Look at the new bottle. Same height, same color, but notice the shape. Suddenly, Gatorade has an hourglass figure. For the customer, this change barely makes a difference. Maybe one Dorito less, or one less gulp of Gatorade. But for the companies, there are huge profits to be made. Imagine a company like Coca-Cola. They sell 2 billion bottles every day. 2 billion every day. Now, if Coca-Cola were to try shrinkflation, what would happen? Assume they take out 0.25 liters from every bottle. You wouldn't even notice it. But that's 0.25 liters multiplied by 2 billion. And that extra Coke that they've saved could fill millions of bottles. This is the power of shrinkflation. And for the record, Coca-Cola did try it. In 2014, they reduced the size of their large bottles. From a 2-liter bottle, they turned it to 1.75 liters. Most of these examples are from the packaged goods industry. And there's a reason for that. Packaged goods display the total weight of their content, so there is no scope of hiding. Having said that, shrinkflation is not limited to chips or drinks. Every industry tries it. Take hotels, for example. Some of them are scrapping breakfast buffets. Some of them are making housekeeping optional. Also restaurants. We're seeing smaller portions, fewer side dishes, even cheaper ingredients. We usually dismiss all of this as an error. Maybe the chef got it wrong, or maybe you forgot how big the portions were the last time you visited. But chances are it is shrinkflation. Now for the big question. Is any of this legal? The answer, unfortunately, is yes, it is. Shrinkflation is perfectly legal because technically there's nothing dishonest about it. The quantity and weight are written on every packet. Having said that, you may feel cheated by what's happening. If so, you have one solution. Make sure to check the quantities of what you're buying, and if they've changed, perhaps you could try something else. This new wave of shrinkflation was triggered by the pandemic. So once the supply chains recover, we should get our extra Doritos back. But knowing our profit-hungry corporates, I wouldn't count on that. And talking about people or things you can't count on, the Chinese foreign minister is touring South Asia. He's traveling like a teenage backpacker, I have to say. No fixed itinerary, no announcements. He's popping up in random places. Today he was in Afghanistan, followed by India. Wang Yi was welcomed in Kabul by Taliban's foreign minister Amir Khan Muttaqi. Muttaqi was all smiles at the airport, and why wouldn't he be? He is welcoming a United Nations Security Council P5 nuclear power, the second largest economy in the world. It is exactly what the Taliban wanted, sort of like a tacit recognition. And frankly, you cannot expect anything more from China. Look at their own human rights record. They don't care about women's rights or religious freedoms. All they care about is opportunities. And that's what Wang Yi discussed. Mining contracts for Chinese companies in Afghanistan, that's what he talked about. The Taliban are more than ready, of course. A Chinese team will reach Afghanistan by the end of March. The number one target is the Mez Aynak copper mine. How should India see this visit? With a lot of caution. From Kabul, Wang Yi flew to New Delhi. He's expected to meet Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar on Friday, but his previous stops should worry New Delhi. First, he traveled to Pakistan. He attended the summit of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the OIC. There he made some unnecessary comments. Wang Yi, the foreign minister of China, decided to talk about Kashmir. Let me tell you what he said, and I'm quoting. On Kashmir, we have heard again today the calls of many of our Islamic friends, and China shares the same hope. You expect Imran Khan to say something like this, but now China is joining in. And the government of India was quick to respond. Let me read out from their statement as well. This is what they said. We reject the uncalled reference to India by the Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi during his speech at the opening ceremony. They should note that India refrains from public judgment of their internal issues. Let me translate that for you. We don't interfere in your business, so stay out of ours. Except it's China. They love to intrude. Wang Yi's words and his travel plans reveal a lot, though. In Islamabad, he's a special guest. In Kabul, he's the investor. Clearly, China is looking after its own interests. Plus, neither regime is friendly to India. One is a sworn rival. The other is made up of terrorists. What does this tell you? That Wang Yi's India visit is nothing to celebrate, really. At best, China is sizing up the Indian leadership. Why now? We can think of three reasons why. Number one, to dehyphenate cooperation and conflict. 50,000 Chinese soldiers are still camping in Ladakh. For India, that's priority number one. For China, it's an afterthought. They want to separate the two issues. On one side, the standoff continues. On the other, business as usual. Which brings us to reason number two, trade. India-China trade crossed $100 billion last year. At first glance, that's great news for both economies. But let me break that number down for you. China has an 80-20 advantage in this trade. They get $80 billion, 80, from India, while India gets $20 billion from China. So obviously Beijing wants to dehyphenate trade and conflict. Reason number three, to divide the anti-China Pacific alliance, basically drive a wedge in the Quad. Just think about it. Japan and Australia have condemned the war in Ukraine. They've also imposed sanctions on Russia. India, on the other hand, has done neither. So Beijing wants to capitalize on this perceived division. Now, this strategy in Beijing is being peddled by the Chinese state media. Let me show you three articles published by the Global Times, all three in the last week. Biden's criticism of India's neutrality on Russia exposes U.S. hypocrisy. That's what the Global Times is saying. Adhering to autonomous foreign policy, Modi immune to Kishida's push on Ukraine crisis. That was China calling India's policy autonomous. Wonderful. And finally, it is necessary for China, India to mend their fraught relations. All that praise for India. Remember, this is the Global Times. The editors don't think for themselves. They simply follow what Beijing says. And right now, Beijing wants business as usual with India. More trade, more exchanges, and hopefully more neutrality. Like we said yesterday, India must be wary of this strategy, and Wang Yi's actions should be enough evidence. A visit to Pakistan, a baseless comment on Kashmir, and a stop in Taliban's Afghanistan. In this case, trade and security cannot be dehyphenated. Perhaps in Ukraine it can. The war is happening thousands of kilometers away. Thus, Russia is a long-time friend. China, though, is neither a friend, nor is it far away. Then we turn to Pakistan. At the beginning of this week, it hosted the 48th conference of the OIC, the one that Wang Yi has just attended, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. Delegates from 57 Islamic countries arrived in Islamabad. They discussed Islamophobia and the need for Islamic unity. For Pakistan, though, the agenda was slightly different. It wanted the OIC to pass a resolution on Kashmir. It wanted the OIC to condemn India's policies. That did not happen. But the OIC did grant Pakistan one concession, a joint probe on the accidental firing of a missile by India. Pakistan asked for it, and the OIC endorsed that demand. Quick background, on the 9th of March, earlier this month, India fired a BrahMos missile, a supersonic cruise missile. It was done by mistake. India called it a human error. The missile landed in northeast Pakistan, about 500 kilometers from Islamabad. It was unarmed, and it caused no damage. India's Defence Ministry said it regrets this incident. India also announced an investigation. Pakistan acknowledged the statement. It asked India to avoid such mishaps in the future. And for a change, it looked like a mature response. Pakistan was finally acting its age. But no, it was only biding its time. It was waiting for the OIC to speak on its behalf, and now the OIC has done that. They've adopted a resolution. They call for a joint probe by India and Pakistan. The appeal has been made to the United Nations to pursue the matter with India. It says India's actions constitute multiple violations of international law, of the UN Charter, of civil aviation rules, of safety protocols, and it endangered human life and prosperity, besides posing a grave threat to regional peace and security. Heavy words. Now, for the record, India's actions were not deliberate, nor did they harm anyone, which cannot be said of Pakistan's actions, deliberate actions. In 2021, I'm giving you one example, Pakistan violated ceasefire along India's borders more than 600 times, 664 to be precise. 1 year before that, 5,100 times ceasefire violations, 5,100. How about raising that for multiple violations of international law? My point is short and simple. Pakistan is overreacting, plus for a country that has threatened India's security for the last 75 years, it's a bit rich. This incident took no lives. It damaged no property, yet the terror state of Pakistan calls it a threat to regional peace and security. What do you think was India's response? It is calling the resolution as irrelevant as Pakistan and the OIC. Let me quote from what they said. The statements and resolutions adopted at the meeting of OIC demonstrate both the irrelevance of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation as a body and the role of Pakistan as its manipulator. The absurdity of this body commenting on the treatment of minorities, and that too at the instance of a serial violator of human rights like Pakistan, is so evident. It indeed is. The question is, what is it aimed at? Well, not too sure about the OIC, but for Pakistan, this is at best a distraction, an attempt at distraction, aimed at diverting attention from the political crisis that its Prime Minister faces. He may be on his way out. We've been telling you about this. A no-confidence vote is coming up. The opposition has the numbers. The allies have turned against him. The army has refused to help. Even Pakistan's Supreme Court is not bailing out Imran Khan now. Earlier today, a 5-judge bench of Pakistan's Supreme Court heard a petition. Imran Khan wanted the defectors to be disqualified. Now, these are members of his own party who've left him, the defectors. The court adjourned the proceedings for tomorrow with some interesting observations. The Chief Justice of Pakistan said this, and let me quote, "Not counting votes during a no-trust proceeding is contemptuous. If a vote can be cast, it can also be counted." In other words, the court cannot stop dissident lawmakers from exercising their right. So what happens now? Fat chance of relief from the court. In 24 hours from now, less than 24 hours in fact, on Friday afternoon, Pakistan's parliament will assemble to seal the fate of its Prime Minister. But reports say that due to the death of a Pakistani lawmaker, the proceedings could get adjourned tomorrow. Well, that will at best buy some more time for him. The vote will take place anyway, most likely next week. If only an OIC resolution could get it cancelled. We'll be tracking it for you. For the moment, we head to the United States, where Apple has unveiled a new feature in the state of Arizona, a feature to let iPhone users digitize their driver's license, meaning they can now have a virtual copy of their license on the Apple Wallet. While most iPhone users in America have welcomed this announcement, the ones in India are not impressed. They say Apple is 6 years too late. Our next report tells you how.
iPhone owners in the state of Arizona have received a gift. An option to upload their driver's license on Apple Wallet starting Wednesday. They will no longer have to show their physical IDs. They can tap on their phones and show a digital version instead. The process is quite simple. All Arizonians have to do is to go to Apple Wallet, tap the plus button, select driver's license, fill up their details, upload their picture, record their facial movements, and submit a scanned copy of their license. Once the details are verified, their digital license will be activated and can be used at checkpoints and at airports across the state of Arizona, but not beyond its borders. Although several other states could follow soon, like Connecticut, Colorado, Georgia, Hawaii, Iowa, Kentucky, Maryland, Mississippi, Ohio, Oklahoma, and Utah. They're all in talks to join Apple's initiative. The problem is that this will only be available on iPhone 8 and the models that came after it. Meaning, if you want a digital license on Apple Wallet, get a new version of the iPhone. A classic business push. So how are Apple users reacting? They're not impressed. Some are worried this feature could risk their privacy. Others say it could be used to track their movements. And yet others are wondering what's wrong with the physical license. The most interesting take is by Indian customers. They say that Apple's feature is 6 years too late because they've been using the service on DigiLocker for 6 years. What's DigiLocker? It's an online service developed by the Government of India in 2015 to provide the exact same services to Indians. What's more, its scope is not limited to a driver's license. From vehicle registration papers to academic mark sheets to bank documents, identification proof, even electricity bills. All of these can be converted into a digital copy on this platform. Indian users say that Apple is late to the party, but better late than never.
Let's talk about something that every one of you watching us from nearly 200 countries can relate to. School reopening. It's happening everywhere. After almost 2 years, schools around the world are finally reopening. It's a big deal for both students, parents, and of course teachers. And it's coming with a scary trend. Children are suddenly reporting poor vision. They're not being able to see the class boards. Parents are worried. As for doctors, they say that in the last 6 months, they have prescribed specs to twice the average number of children. Why is this happening? Why are children suddenly suffering from vision problems? Blame the pandemic. It has exposed children to excessive screen time. Their eyes have gotten used to near vision, looking at screens that are closer to them. Now, after 2 years of studying online, staring at the class board, which is far away, is becoming difficult for the eyes. So that's one problem. Here's another one. The pandemic forced more school-going children to stay indoors. Their outdoor activities were restricted, their exposure to sunlight was limited, so a lot of children are suffering from vitamin D deficiency, and this is negatively impacting their eye health. Problem number 3, overexposure to devices. There is no doubt that during the pandemic, children spent more time staring at screens than they'd ever done before. They were either studying online or gaming or watching something on YouTube or Netflix or even TikTok. By August 2020, that's within the first year of school closures, parents said their children were spending at least 4 hours on the screen, on any one of these screens. How much time should they ideally be spending? Well, ideally none. Children under the age of 2 should not be in front of a screen at all. Those above the age of 2 should spend not more than 2 hours in front of a screen. At least that's what experts say. But during the pandemic, screen time for children went up 50%. The result is this: nearsightedness or myopia. Doctors say that a majority of school children coming in for eye checkups are going home with spectacles. And that too with power above 1. Those who were already wearing glasses have seen a jump in power. Some children are also reporting dry eyes, excessive rubbing of eyes, blurry vision and discomfort in the eyes. It's not like these problems sprung up after the school opened. It's just that they've come to light now. Parents began rushing their children to doctors when children began complaining about not being able to clearly see the letters on the class board. Experts say they saw this coming. As early as January 2021, a study of over 120,000 children in China revealed that by the end of 2020, myopia in children aged 6 to 8 had increased 3 times. This was the first year of the pandemic. How serious is this problem? Myopia in itself is not too big of an issue. In fact, it is the most common eye problem, nearsightedness. Estimates say more than 2.5 billion people across the world have myopia. 2.5 billion. But you see, for us adults, specs are not such a big problem. They're uncomfortable, but they're not such a big deal. Either we've gotten used to them or replaced them with lens or an eye surgery, but neither of these is an option for children and pre-teens. So specs become a hassle for them. They become a hurdle in the playground. Here's another problem. Studies show the earlier myopia starts in children, the more likely they are to suffer from vision-related complications later on in life. What kind of complications? Cataracts, detached retinas, even glaucoma. So if you've seen any of these symptoms in your child, dry eyes, blurry vision, headache, or any vision-related problems, do take her to the doctor. As for the others, aim for small lifestyle changes. Number 1, ask your child to keep her laptop at an arm's length. Number 2, adjust the laptop's brightness to 60 to 70%. And 3, follow the 20-20-20 rule. What's that? Basically, when working on a laptop or staring at a screen, ask your child to take a break every 20 minutes. Then look at an object that's at least 20 feet away for 20 seconds. So that's 20-20-20, not too difficult, you see. Avoiding exposure to screens is impossible in this day and age, and that's a fact. So taking eye health seriously is very important, and I'll tell you why. Because estimates say half of the world's population will have myopia by 2050. Half. This is another pandemic in the making, so stay alert and stay safe. And before we end tonight's show, here's something I want to talk about. Ashley Barty. Does the name ring a bell? Either way, I'll tell you about her. Ashley Barty, or Ash Barty as she's known, is world's tennis number 1. All of 25. She's from Australia. She won the Australian Open just 2 months back, and now she's decided to retire. Ash Barty is just 25 and she has retired. Goes without saying, her decision has shocked the world. Most reactions began with a why. Why is she doing this? Why has a tennis star retired so young? Why has she retired at the top of her career? Ashley Barty had everything going for her. She began playing tennis at the age of 5. She was coached by Jim Joyce. She became the junior Wimbledon champion in 2011. She broke into top 20 in 2017. She won the 2019 French Open, also became the first Australian woman to win that title in 46 years. She became world number 1 in June 2019. She won Wimbledon in 2021 and finished the year 2021 as the world number 1 for 3 consecutive years. Earlier this year, she also became the first Australian woman to win the Australian Open in 44 years. What a shining career. Ashley Barty was on top of her game. So why again did she choose to quit? Her decision has started a debate. The question being asked is, why are young people retiring so early? I will tell you why. I've spoken to young people. I wouldn't know otherwise. The younger generation is defining retirement in their own terms. Retirement is no longer about quitting, they say. Retirement is no longer about sitting at home. Today, retirement is not necessarily leisure, and retirement definitely is not about age. Today, retirement is about starting the next journey, building something new, starting another career perhaps. Today, you can have multiple career cycles. It is no longer about what you want to become when you grow up or what you want to achieve in life. Today, it's about what all you want to be when you grow up and what all boxes you want to tick off. The scope's endless, and so are the opportunities. It is challenging, yes. Most people have multiple interests. And today, the time is such that it is possible to hone every interest, or most of them at least, and make a career in as many fields as you want to. Ashley Barty has always spoken about her other interests. She likes fishing, she says. She likes cricket. She likes golfing. She's even won the Brookwater Golf Club Championship in 2020. Clearly, this woman is multi-talented. So why would she or any youngster stop after climbing just one mountain? Ashley Barty reached the top of the table in no time, and she has decided to leave on a high, to devote her life and her time to other things that make her happy.
I'm so grateful to everything that tennis has given me. It's given me all of my dreams plus more, but I know that the time is right now for me to step away.
If anything, Ash Barty is a chip of a generation. The youth today believes in job hopping. Career hopping is no longer about quitting or giving up. Youngsters move out of a career when they think that they've got everything they wanted from it. It is not unusual today for a 21-year-old to have already worked as a barista, a customer service executive, then opened her own skincare brand and moved on to her second startup. This is the career at 2022. Today, Gen Z is changing jobs at a rate of 134%. 134% higher than they were in 2019. Millennials are switching 24% more. The pandemic has accelerated this trend, and I'm not making any of this up. This is LinkedIn data. My point is Ashley Barty's retirement is in tune with the times.
There's no right way, there's no wrong way. It's just my way. And this is perfect for me to share it with you, to talk to you about it, with my team, my loved ones, that I'll be retiring from tennis. And it's the first time I've actually said it out loud, and it's hard to say. But I'm so happy and I'm so ready, and I just know at the moment in my heart, for me as a person, this is right.
So coming back to the question, why has a tennis star retired so young? Because there is more to Ashley Barty than tennis, she says. Just like there is more to you and me than our current jobs, perhaps. Though I love mine for the moment. Retiring from it is a personal choice. Definitely a very tough choice. But it's one that young people are no longer afraid to make. As for Ashley Barty, she has put down a tennis racket to pick up her next cap. With that, it's a wrap. We're leaving you with Gravitas Global Images. Thanks for watching.